Hi, my name is Estela Diaz Knott, and I grew up in Luray, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley, and I grew up Mexilachen. This ethnic identity is something that it took me a long time to come to. Mexilachen means that my father is from the Appalachians and his people have been there since the late 1700s. My mother is from Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico, and her people had migrated from central Mexico to the northern parts of Mexico over hundreds of years, really. And she met my father when he was in the military in El Paso, Texas, and they fell in love, and he asked her to marry him, and then they got married, and he brought her home to Luray to build a life. And in Luray at the time, there were no other Mexicans or Latino people in the area, so no one was there that spoke her language. And it was probably very, very isolating for her because she knew English, but it was a different kind of English that they spoke in Luray, Virginia. There was a twang, which I grew up with a little bit, or a lot. And so growing up in my house, what I like to call Mexilachen food is sometimes we would have biscuits and gravy, sometimes we would have tamales. Every Friday we'd have fish because in my mother's religious experience growing up, Catholic, they would have fish on Fridays. And so we adopted that as part of my mother's tradition. About growing up Mexilachen, in my home there were lots of times where if it was me and my cousins with my mother and maybe a friend who, there were eventually some people who came in the 80s who were of Latino descent, and so it was mostly, for most of the time, me and my Latino cousins who had come to live with us. And so when there were no people in the house who spoke English, we would end up speaking Spanish instead. And if someone would arrive that spoke English, then we would switch into English. And I guess you could call that like code switching, because what that means is that we would just sort of see who was in the room and wanted to make sure that as many people as possible understood at the same time while we were talking. And sometimes there would be translating going on. Cuando, por ejemplo, había alguien que no hablaba español o inglés, empezábamos a hablar en español, but then we would translate if they couldn't speak English. If there was a person who spoke English, we would translate that into Spanish. So we would do a lot of switching back and forth en inglés or español. Sometimes we would even sort of mix things up, like we would say, hey, no olvides a loquear la puerta, which means, hey, don't forget to lock the door. So there are lots of different kinds of times, or lots of times when we would have English and Spanish starting to mix together, which I've grown up understanding to be the language of Spanglish. The earliest memory that I have of going to school, I remember sitting in a classroom and having a hard time sitting for a long period of time. And I'm not sure at 53 like what that was all about, but I can guess, really. I would say that maybe because I grew up bilingual, I was sort of trying to adjust to the languages, or the English language that was being spoken in the classroom setting by my teachers. And I was also hyperactive, so it was very hard for me to sit. And so I guess one of the strongest memories that I have were walking the hallways in our school. I had a lot of really good friends, and I remember that some of them also were mixed race children like myself. One of them was Appalachian and Alaskan. Another one was Appalachian and Vietnamese. And some of them were Appalachian and African American. The things about our race or cultural identity weren't so much in the forefront of my mind. It was mostly like whether someone liked the same kind of ice cream I liked, or whether someone was better at math than me and helped me with a problem and they were kind enough to notice, or I liked singing and there were some people who really liked singing, and so we decided to join the play that was coming up that year and perform in the play together. Or people who were in choir with me or in band, or enjoyed being in a club that I might have liked to join. And then, people who shared a lot of common interests that I shared. And I think that is what I thought about more when I was in elementary school and in high school. One of the things I do remember is I remember having to be taken out of the classroom because I had challenges with reading and math. And I didn't think about it at the time, but that could have been because I grew up bilingual, or it could have been because I was hyperactive. And I have a hyperactive mind. Now as an adult, it's a lot easier because I have tools and I understand how to deal with being hyperactive. But if that weren't the case in elementary school, it could have also been because I was bilingual. And so I was grateful to the teachers now I'm grateful to the teachers who really helped me learn English in the way that I needed to learn English, to be able to get through my classes and go to college and do the work that I'm doing now. And I remember how important it was for me. I think the first memory that I have of someone recognizing my cultural identity, or my mother's cultural identity specifically, was Miss Sugars, who noticed that there was a time for writing a poem in class, and she was teaching us English. And I remember she helped me write some verses of that poem in Spanish. And she would call on me whenever we would be reading something that had a little bit of Spanish in it. And I just remember feeling really special, and it makes me want to cry. Because there was no one else around other than my mother and later my cousins who really spoke Spanish. And so it was a beautiful thing to be able to feel those words in my mouth. Colores, colors, naranja, orange, burrito, donkey, or vaca, cow. When Ms. Sugars would ask me to pronounce the words in Spanish that we were reading in class, or to read my poem in Spanish, it really warmed my heart. It sort of set off a little flame in me to sort of express myself culturally from my Mexican side. And I think that was probably the first times in my life that I really started to feel like this bridge building kind of thing that I do, this bridge work that I do now. This feeling of, oh, I can speak 2 languages, and that's valuable. She made me feel that I had value because I was coming from 2 different cultures. And not just language-wise. As I got older, in middle school and high school, whenever there were things that would come up that were related to Spanish-speaking things, or Spanish, not Spanish, but like Mexican or Latin American identity, I oftentimes would be asked to sort of step up to that role. And that also really made me feel like I could be that side of myself that oftentimes I did feel like I had to hide. And maybe not, it's like I look back on it, it didn't feel like hiding at the time. It didn't feel like hiding at the time. I didn't really know what to call it at the time. I was just a person growing up in the world. And it wasn't until I got older that I started to be able to put the names to the feelings that I had of feeling left out sometimes. And sometimes it was intentional that others left me out, but most of the time it was unintentional, I think, because there was this friction between whether I could relate to that side of that person or not, if that makes sense. Like sometimes, for example, I think for a young mind to understand, it's like if you're going to a place and you're going to have some pizza and everything is going to be about like eating dairy and tomatoes, and you have a friend who can't eat dairy or tomatoes, you might think, oh, I would really like to invite so-and-so, but they can't eat these things, right? So I think that's probably a good example of like maybe how some friends might have felt. Maybe they felt that I wouldn't have felt comfortable in certain kinds of situations. But that's something that I realize now that it was a missed opportunity to introduce me to parts of their culture that I might have enjoyed. I might have thrived in those environments. So I encourage, people to think outside of the box and to not invite somebody just because you think they won't feel comfortable, and to definitely invite somebody even though they may not speak the English, the language or the English language very well, because it's when you immerse them in an environment that they don't speak in. Likewise, if you don't speak Spanish, immerse yourself in friendships that speak different languages than you do, because it's a place that will give you lots more experience about where your friends are coming from, and it will open up your mind and your ear to the beauty of different languages and cultures. So I think growing up bilingual and bicultural definitely gave me that. I code switched very quickly between Appalachian culture and Mexican culture, and now that I've traveled all over the place, I've traveled all over Latin America, very easily to any other kinds of Latin American cultures in the Americas. Really, something that I would really like to encourage young people to think about, whether you're growing up in the Appalachians of Virginia or anywhere else in the United States or the world, is that cultures are blending and fusing together all the time. It's been hundreds of thousands of years that we have been evolving and growing as human beings, moving towards water, towards work, towards food, towards better land, away from war, away from famine. Always dreaming of a better life someplace and being able to call someplace home. And something to think about is that specifically, like in Virginia right now, there are people sowing roots who are coming from other parts of the world, who speak different languages, and their children are having to learn the English language. And maybe some of you are really loving them as friends, and you're learning a little bit of their languages. And I just want to encourage everyone to look into each other. And while you're looking into each other and you're valuing and you're noticing the cultural exchange that you're having, that you too have culture. Your people may have been here for a really long time, but those people came from somewhere. So ask your parents where your people came from. Did they come from Ireland, Scotland, England? Did they come from Germany, Italy, France, Spain, the Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland? Who knows? There are lots of places that your people could have came from. So if you consider yourself white or white Appalachian, ask your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, look at pictures. Ask your mom and your dad about your foods that they remember eating growing up, or songs that they remember singing, or where their parents went to church, or were there any clubs or people that used to get together? Did anyone in their family speak a different a language, or did they have different accents? Ask them about your traditions, because we're all coming from somewhere. And I think it has been through this awareness of growing up bicultural that now, at the age that I am, I realize that there's so much rich cultural traditions within me, and I don't have to let any of them go. I can love all of the pieces of myself, and you can too.